This is the remote island of Bhashan Char, located in an estuary of the Meghna River. Surrounded by mangrove trees, the uninhabited island is 123 kilometers away from the world's largest refugee camp, Cox's Bazar. Bangladesh is planning to start the process of relocating 100,000 Rohingya refugees from the crowded camps of Cox's Bazar to the newly built facility at Bhashan Char Island. The facilities on the island developed by Bangladesh Navy are believed to be far better, but most Rohingya scoff at the idea of moving to an island. They claim they will be exposed to cyclones and frequent floods. So what's the truth? Is Bhashan Char suitable for habitation? What's at stake? WION gained access to the island of Bhashan Char to bring you an on-ground report. The island is located almost 52 kilometers from the mainland. Formed by Himalayan silt in 2006, Bhashan Char spans about 40 square kilometers. The government has been building infrastructure on the island under a multi-million-dollar project. The plan for relocation first came up in 2015, but no major progress was initially made. The United Nations and several global human rights organizations opposed the idea, saying relocation to the island would further complicate the lives of the refugees because of how often it floods.
I urge caution and patience by the Bangladesh government and full cooperation with the UN and the international community. There should be no rush to relocate refugees, such as before the monsoon season, which is one of the possibilities that has been outlined to me.
As we were coming back from Cox's Bazar yesterday, we actually flew over the island, so we had a very distant glimpse of some of the preparations, but that is all that we have seen since September of 2018.
An estimated 624,000 Rohingya refugees, a Muslim ethnic minority in Myanmar's northern Rakhine state, fled Myanmar and streamed into Bangladesh to escape oppression and extreme violence from Myanmar's military and Buddhist majority. They streamed into Bangladesh in the 3-month period of August to November of 2017, overwhelming the local population. Rohingya Muslims have long demanded that Myanmar, a predominantly Buddhist country, give them citizenship, safety, and their own land and homes they left behind. Myanmar has refused to recognize Rohingya as citizens or even as one of its ethnic groups, rendering them stateless. The country's half-hearted attempts to repatriate thousands of Rohingya Muslims who fled from Myanmar to Bangladesh have failed. Not a single one took up the offer. With repatriation stalled, Bangladesh is now exploring relocation. The Bangladeshi Navy has executed the Bhashan Char project at a cost of about 3,100 crore taka or $11 million. Knowing that the island is prone to floods, erosion and cyclones, the authorities built a 3-meter-high embankment along its perimeter to keep out tidal surges during cyclones. All the buildings have been constructed 4 feet above the ground to avoid any sort of flooding. Every Every cluster has 12 houses with 16 rooms and a 4-story steel structure shelter station. There are 1,440 rooms and 120 shelter stations in 120 cluster villages. Every room can accommodate 4 people. And in case of any calamity, 860 people can stay at shelter stations, which can withstand cyclones with speeds of about 260 kilometers an hour.
Bhashan Char is ready to receive nearly 1 lakh Rohingya refugees from houses for living, solar panels for electricity, biogas fuel for cooking and waste management, cyclone centers, mobile networks. Everything is available for them. Still, Rohingya refugees are not interested to come here, saying it's a cyclone-prone area. They are concerned that what they will do in any emergency case as it is disconnected from mainland.
12 kilometers of embankment at a height of 9 feet has already been completed, and work is underway to increase the height to 19 feet.
It's not an isolated island. It's an island like Sandweep and Hatia. If you climb on the roof of this building, you will see Sandweep on one side and Hatia Island on the other. The facilities of the shelter here are more than those of the 2 islands. For example, Sandweep has a shelter center for 4,000 people, whereas the shelter center is for only 1,000 people. Besides, the shelter centers are very close to home. The 12.1 kilometer dam that we have erected has made it easier to face with a number of recent storms such as Fani, Amphan and Bulbul. Even the water was out of the dam at that time.
As far as the facilities are concerned, 2 20-bed hospitals and 4 community clinics have been constructed. There is a police station and police post on the island. There are 2 playgrounds and some space for playing in every cluster house. The island also has 2 helipads. This year's monsoon floods were a stark reminder that Bangladesh is truly at the forefront of the climate emergency. The floods were the second highest since 1989 and the second longest since 1998. Every year, thousands of volunteers and rescuers take part in disaster management drills that are held in these 2 camps at Cox's Bazar. The Kutupalong Rohingya refugee camp and the Naya Paro refugee camp.
Join petrol. I'm to escape.
It was the orange jackets and yellow helmets. They are the same volunteers.
Many people are stuck under the soil, and many of them
On the main road, now we can see the approach.
Crowded into sprawling camps on unstable hillsides, Rohingya children, women and men are living in structures made of bamboo, plastic sheets, cardboard and sometimes corrugated iron sheets. As the monsoon season sets in, conditions worsen. Volunteers from the International Federation of Red Cross, a humanitarian aid organization, are helping people prepare for floods and landslides.
Behind me you see pieces of moli bamboo. Each family is going to get 60 pieces of this type of bamboo. They get another 4 pieces of bamboo called borak bamboo, which is much thicker in diameter, which people will use to frame up the walls and trusses, rafters of their homes. We're also going to be providing each family with 2 tarpaulins, nails, tie wire, rope, and then the tools necessary to build their shelters. There's all sorts of things like that that will help them take the shelters that they're living in now, which are a bit ramshackle, makeshift, made out of the materials that they could find when they arrived, and hopefully this will help them construct robust shelters that will keep them safe in the coming wet months.
On the other hand, the Bhashan Char, with all the construction that has taken place in the last couple of years, Rohingya people will be less exposed to the elements. But they fear that the island may get submerged in the future. Bhashan means immersion in the local language. Bhashan Char emerged from the sea around 15 years ago and is one of many shifting islands formed by sediment in the mouth of the Meghna River. Another concern voiced by the international community is that the relocation may cut Rohingyas off from the rest of the world. But even at Cox's Bazar, much like other refugee camps around the world, strict restrictions are imposed on the Rohingya. While thousands of Rohingya refugees have agreed to move to the newly built camp, others fear that once relocated, they will not be allowed to come back to the mainland. The government of Bangladesh is going out of its way to assuage concerns about the relocation. According to the Bangladesh Navy, refugee facilities have been designed to make the residents self-sufficient. Fishing, poultry farming, sheep and cattle rearing, cultivation of rice and vegetables, carpentry, handicrafts, tailoring are some of the likely occupations. But if the relocation does not take place in the coming months, this costly infrastructure could fall into disuse.
Refugees are not interested to come here. They are also saying that it will be so difficult for them to communicate with their relatives who are still living in Myanmar.
The tragedy of the Rohingya people has been unfolding for decades. The first wave of around 200,000 refugees came in 1978. A second wave of around 250,000 fled Myanmar for Bangladesh in 1991 and 1992. Over the years, the numbers swelled. Today, nearly 1 million Rohingya refugees live in overcrowded, unsanitary conditions in one of the most densely populated countries in the world. Space is stretched very thin. As COVID-19 spreads through Bangladesh, the challenges have increased. Around 860,000 Rohingya live in just 26 square kilometers of land in Cox's Bazar. Up to 10 family members live in a room. Maintaining physical distance in these settings is simply not possible. Keeping the water and sanitation infrastructure running for such a large camp population is a mammoth challenge for the government.
Across this entire region, most Rohingya live on the margins of society, and they need to be assured access to basic healthcare, clean drinking water, a reliable food supply, or meaningful work and educational opportunities. The COVID-19 pandemic has worsened their living conditions, made access to services even more challenging, increased the risk of sexual and gender-based violence, and exacerbated the impact of infectious diseases for displaced Rohingya living in the crowded camps, such as those in Cox's Bazar and in Rakhine State.
Fearing a population boom would worsen a humanitarian crisis unfolding along its border, Bangladesh also carries out birth control drives in its overcrowded camps. Enormous families with more than 10 children are not uncommon in the camps. In a report published in 2019, the United Nations High Commissioner for Refugees said some 91,000 children were born inside the camps after the latest Rohingya exodus in 2017. Family planning teams have been deployed to offer advice and distribute contraceptives. If this rate is not capped, then the situation can cripple the already fragile economy of the nation. There is an increasing involvement of Rohingya in various criminal activities, including human trafficking, drug dealing, theft, and militancy. The existence of criminal gangs in Rohingya refugee camps is a serious threat for other refugees and the host nation. From the 4th to the 7th of October, a series of clashes erupted between allegedly armed Rohingya gangs, culminating in an arson attack and shootings that left many dead and injured. This deadly spate of violence triggered extreme fear among the residents. The government was forced to deploy additional police, border guards, and military to bring the situation under control.
Rohingyas are becoming reckless day by day. They have learned local language for 3 years and now are moving freely outside the camp. The demands of their daily lives are increasing and they are becoming violent to get them. They are involved in drugs, kidnapping, arms, and human trafficking. So the local law enforcement agencies are struggling now to control this huge population. In the last 3 years, there have been at least 631 cases against Rohingya refugees in Cox's Bazar for 12 types of crimes. So that 1,200 refugees have been accused, and still 530 on male and 46 female are in jail. At least 53 Rohingyas have been killed in last 3 years in fighting against themselves. So the whole situation is being out of control. Locals say that if the law enforcement agencies cannot control these refugees, it will be so tough for them to live there.
The United Nations has warned that more than 500,000 Rohingya refugees are at risk of exploitation in Bangladesh. Tales of trafficking in the refugee camps are rife. Women and children are the main victims, lured out of the camps and into labor and sex work. In May 2019, Dhaka police arrested 4 human traffickers, including a Rohingya couple. 23 teenage Rohingya girls were rescued after being brought from refugee camps to the capital Dhaka to be sent to Malaysia by air. Describing the Rohingya crisis as a threat to regional security, Bangladesh Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina has been urging the international community to come together to resolve the issue. So, what is the world doing? On October 22, 2020, UNHCR, along with the US, the UK and EU, hosted an international virtual donor conference on sustaining support for the Rohingya refugee response. The conference successfully raised about $600 million for this humanitarian crisis. This is in addition to the nearly $636 million in assistance already committed so far in 2020 under the Bangladesh Joint Response Plan and the Myanmar Humanitarian Response Plan. The representatives of different countries took the opportunity to thank Bangladesh for hosting the refugees.
Over 800,000 displaced Rohingyas are now temporarily living in Cox's Bazar. This represents an additional burden to an already untenable situation, particularly for the host country, Bangladesh, a country that should be applauded for this humanitarian stance.
And a particular thanks to the people of Bangladesh, especially in the Cox's Bazar district, and your government for your gracious hosting of the Rohingya.
Let me acknowledge the generosity of the government and the people of Bangladesh.
また新型コロナウイルス感染症や避難長期化の影響がある中、バングラデシュ政府による避難民の継続的な受け入れと保護に改めて感謝を表します。
Bangladesh deserves continued support in order to face the situation in the camps.
Germany remains committed to providing humanitarian assistance, and we will continue to support the government of Bangladesh.
The participants ended the conference with a promise to continue engaging with concerned countries towards finding a long-term solution to the Rohingya crisis. In a damning report from 2018, the UN team said that the 600,000 Rohingya inside Myanmar's Rakhine state still face a serious risk of genocide, warning the repatriation of 1 million already driven from the country by the army remains impossible. Ahead of the election on November the 8th, Aung San Suu Kyi's NLD government has excluded the Rohingya Muslim minority from either voting or standing for the upcoming election. More than 1.5 million people in Myanmar's conflict-ridden areas have been politically disenfranchised after the country's election commission scrapped voting in those areas. Rejected by the country they were born in and shunned by many others, for Rohingya, there is no place called home. Perhaps Bangladesh's Bhashan Char Island can become a symbol of hope.